they often didn't make it. You know, they had to, there's no place to land. When you,
Well, this interview process is going to be pretty painless. I'll ask you just a few questions.
sure.
I'm going to make a marking statement first for the camera.
All right.
All right. Today we're interviewing Mr. Donald H. Engert at the Culver Road Armory in Rochester. It is November 21st, 2001. Michael Akey, interviewer. Wayne Clark, videographer. Where were you born, sir?
I was born in Rochester, New York, February 16th, 1925.
So you're a native.
Yes.
Okay. You grew up in went to school in Rochester?
I went to school in East Rochester.
Oh, okay. How was that?
Just 7 miles each way. Well, my grandfather had a grocery store and meat market there, and he also had 2 farms in Webster, West Webster, and my mother married his son, and he in I don't know what year, but I was born in 1925, but my father left home when I was 30. He was an alcoholic, but his father provided us a house to live in for nothing for my mother and my brother and myself. So it happened to be in East Rochester. It was a big double. And then depression got tough and he couldn't handle it, so my other grandfather had the second mortgage on it, on this house, $1,500. First mortgage was $3,500. And so he went to my mother's father. My father's father went to my mother's father and he said, I'd like to turn over, my mother's name was Delora, D-E-L-O-R-A. Well, Delora and the boys have a place to stay, so if you forgive that $1,500, I'll sign the house over to her. So my grandfather was a tough old farmer out in Pittsford, and he said, I'll forgive the $1,500, but there were 3 lots there. The house was in the middle. He says, you got to give her the 2 side lots, which he did. And so that's where I was in East Rochester on South Washington Street. So I lived there all my life. I worked 32 years at Kodak as a machine builder, and I retired in March 1st, '83, and in June of '83, we moved to Penfield off of Creek Street on a contemporary ranch on a private road, and I had accumulated enough money by then. So I had the 2 acres and a contemporary ranch with a finished basement, walkout basement with in-ground pool, 76 Eldorado convertible, hot tub.
Did you, were you in, when did you graduate from high school?
East Rochester.
What year?
Well, I was supposed to graduate in '42, but I flunked physics, so I graduated in January '43.
Do you remember where you were when Pearl Harbor
Yes.
happened? Where were you?
I was right in the kitchen of the, well, as I said before, I moved to Penfield, but we sold that house last December. Now I moved back in the original house that we lived in. I made a 5-family house out of it, 26 rooms, and my wife and I live there now. Our children are all gone, and I was in the kitchen in that house, and in those days we had a coal stove in the kitchen, and on the end it had 3 gas burners, and I was sitting in there and came over the radio. Sunday morning, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
Remember what may have gone through your mind?
In those days, East Rochester was a small, like all these Pittsford, Penfield, we were just a little bigger than Hamlets, but not much.
Right.
And if I went to Rochester from East Rochester and got off of East Avenue or Main Street, I was lost. And so I really, you know, in school we never had much about war. I didn't really know too much. It was kind of vague.
Did you, so you went into the service right after you graduated from high school?
I was 18, 16th of February, and I was drafted on April 23rd in 43, same year.
Okay, where'd you go for basic?
The first 2 or 3 days we went to Fort Niagara for sorting out, whatever they call it. And, you know, they took aptitude tests and that. And I went to Atlantic City to the Air Force for basic training.
Okay. Did you know you were going to go into the Air Force?
No, they took the top third people in this test, and they went to the Air Force.
Okay.
So we lived in beautiful big hotels on the boardwalk. I don't know how many stories, but higher than I'd ever seen before. It's the first time I ever saw a lavender bathtub or any colored bathtub. And the troops were housed in these hotels, and but one hotel right across the street sideways from me was the mess hall and all that stuff. And every day we'd fall out and march 5 miles to what originally was the Atlantic City dump. They had filled it in and leveled it off and swamp or something. They called it Brigantine Field. And that's where we did our push-ups and all that stuff. There was pieces of glass and no jump, but I remember the glass, and we marched, did close order drill and so forth, and then marched back to the hotels, had our lunch, and then back out again. Or maybe in the afternoon they had some orientation. We did articles of war, you know.
So you did your basic training where?
In Atlantic City.
Atlantic City. And after Atlantic City, where'd you go?
I had taken my senior class, all the boys, I guess everybody took some kind of a test when we were seniors. I don't exactly remember what it was. Some way connected with the government. And I must have scored high enough because they sent me to City College in New York. I was for engineering. And I really didn't want to go there. I wanted to stay I wanted to be in the air. That wasn't Air Force, it was engineering. So we took some more tests there, and I was never very good at math, and I knew I didn't score very well. And after the 3rd day, we had an interview with a captain and a civilian. And he said, "Are you interested in this program?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And they were amazed because there were so many guys there from New York City that wanted to stay there that they'd never heard that before, you know. And he said, "Well, what do you want to?" He said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, I know I didn't score very well in the math. I don't think I do very well in the engineering program, and I'd like to go back to the Air Force." So I don't remember how long. It wasn't too long before they shipped me to Greensboro, North Carolina, for reclassification center. And from there I went to Biloxi, Mississippi, to Air Force and Engine Mechanics, Airplane and Engine Mechanics School. It was around the clock. I was on the midnight to 8 a.m. class, and we went there maybe 3 months. And after I graduated from there, I was sent to Aerial Gunnery School in Laredo, Texas, and we were there 6 weeks.
How was Texas?
I'm sorry?
How was Texas?
It was right on the Mexican border. It was Laredo, Texas, right across from Nuevo Laredo, Texas. Well, it was dry and no grass, no trees, no nothing, but it was the first time I'd ever flown. I remember I got in the back seat of a single engine training plane or whatever, and they had a 30 caliber machine gun pointing backwards. It was mounted on an iron ring that went around, and they had a helmet with the goggles and it was like in the movies, you know. And the pilot took off, and they took you over an area where they had all mock-up planes and trucks and stuff on the ground, and there was 200 rounds of 30 caliber ammunition in this machine gun. So what you had to do was stand up in the slipstream, turn the gun around, lock it down, and then as the targets came past the trailing edge of the wing, you strafed them. And it was 5 minutes to 5 in the afternoon, and the pilot said, listen, I got a date in Laredo at 5 o'clock. He says, if you don't get them all off the first round, he says, pull them out and throw them over. So, but I did, I got them all off, and we went back, and I remember as we took off, like I said, I was just a, country kid, and flying. I got in the plane, you could see the ground pulling away like that. It was really amazing. I didn't get sick or anything. And from there, I went to Casper, Wyoming, where I was I was engineer gunner and crew chief of a B-24 Liberator bomber. And we flew training missions out of Casper, all over the mountains, over Yellowstone, all out there. And one night, we took off about 4, and about 11 o'clock, we got into a I don't know how high we were, very bad lightning, rain, thunder, and bad storm. And the wings started to ice up, and the radio was screwed up from the lightning, and we were lost. So time went on, and finally the radio operator got a hold of somebody. I don't know. He was the oldest guy in the crew. He was 34 years old. And Raymond Naramore from Massachusetts, somebody. Anyway, the pilot says, well, it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning now, we're going to get ready to land. So my job when we landed as engineer was to stand just to the rear, and in the center, the pilots were left pilot on the left, co-pilot on the right. Then there was a pedestal here with the throttles, 4 engines, and there were 4 knobs. So when you took off, you were down at the end of the runway, and pilot and the co-pilot both used to put their feet on the brakes, and then he'd start revving the engines up, all 4 at a time, and the plane would bounce just like this on the end of the runway. And then when they got up to, they called it inches of mercury. There was so many, they had the turbo superchargers underneath the engine, about that big around, to force air into the cylinders to get more compression, I guess. And like I say, the plane would bounce up and down, and then when they figured it was enough, they'd let go, and you could feel the plane go forward, and then you take off. And landing, I would stand just behind this pedestal, and I would call off. I'd watch the airspeed on the dashboard. It wasn't they didn't call it dashboard, but I forgot.
Control panel.
Yeah, and I'd have to call the airspeed because the pilot was watching the ground. He couldn't see the ground. The plane the nose was up so he had to watch out here in lane. And I would call it out, and we'd start about 125. I just keep 120, 120, 115, 115, 110, and about 100 miles an hour, 110. The wheels would go down. You'd hear them squeal, and the smoke would come off the bottom, and then you land. The third wheel was in the front and then under the nose, and before you landed, you had to go down underneath the flight deck. They had a small, was like a lawnmower engine with a hydraulic pump on it. And also, these nose gears had the habit of collapsing, so there was a big steel clamp that used to go over where the nose gear used to lock into position. The clamp went over, and then it was a bolt there you had to turn down so that the nose wheel couldn't collapse. And you also started this little small engine, which always seemed to start. The hydraulic pressure was run off a pump on number 3 engine. That controlled the brakes, the flaps, and all. A lot of hydraulics. In the bomb bay, both sides of the bomb bay all lined with stainless steel hydraulic lines. About quarter of an inch, maybe a little bigger, somewhere bigger. And so that was my assistant's job, to get it down underneath and start up that, put the clamp on and start up the engine, the hydraulic engine. But so, like I said before, I called out the airspeed till we landed, and then we landed. Well, we got lost this night, and the pilot said, we found the field, so I didn't even think about it. We landed, and I felt a touchdown and that, and it was a very small, it might have been almost a grass field, I don't know. It was a very small field, anyway. And we were going 100 miles plus an hour, and the pilot didn't say anything, and we went off the end of, we ran out of runway, and the Lincoln Highway was coming across there, and we must have nosed into that. Well, my assistant, Nick, his name was from New York City, was underneath this flight deck, and the underside of the plane filled up with dirt. This was 1 o'clock in the morning now. We hit, crashed, dark, couldn't see anything. No lights, no nothing. So the first thing I heard was this kid Nick crying for his mother. Mama, Mama, Mama. And I looked up, the only light I could see was up in the top of the fuselage. It was about a 30-inch square door. And right adjacent to where I was, there was this aluminum post about that square with steps, just pieces out there where you could step on and get up on top of the plane. And that broke open, and I looked up and saw it, so I started for it. In the back of the flight deck, just on the opposite wall of the bomb bay, there were 4 glass tubes about this high, 3/4 of an inch, and they were filled with gasoline, and it told you how much gas was in your, there were, I think, maybe 4 gas tanks. They told you how much gas was in your tanks. There was also a controller and a pump, so you could transfer gas. If one engine was using more gas, you could put more gas over in that gas tank. And it broke, and I was covered with, soaked with gasoline and shards of glass. And like I say, the only light I could see was up. And I started up, and the bombardier was ahead of me. His name was Lieutenant Breeze. And he got up there, and he got hung up somehow. I said, Breeze, get the hell out of here. And he says, I'm stuck. My arm's stuck. And his left arm was caught between the fuselage and the door. And he had a wristwatch on. So I didn't say anything. I just got up on the next step with my shoulder under his rear end, and I shoved him out. And it tore his wristwatch, tore his whole arm up, tore his wristwatch out. And he went out onto the wing. Of course, by then, the trailing edge of the wing was only maybe this far off the ground. And so I went out, and we got down, and the crew gathered around. The number 3 engine had caught on fire. And but it didn't, it must have just been a small line by the carburetor, because it went out by itself. And the pilot and co-pilot was there, and he says, everybody out? And I says, Nicky's under the flight deck. So he and the co-pilot went up the wing and then went down through this fuselage door and onto the flight deck, and then underneath the flight deck, he got this kid out, and he had a broken back. And didn't sever the cord. I don't know how they did it. Well, they had to lift him from here up to there to get him up on the top of the plane. Well, from underneath. I don't know how the dirt was, because I didn't go down there, you know. And they got him out, and then we all went to the hospital. I never saw Nick again. And by then there was the police and the ambulances and everybody. So we went to the local hospital, and we stayed there overnight. And the next day, the colonel from Casper, Wyoming field came down in his plane, and He said, who's the engineer? And I said, oh, gee, yes, I am. He says, we're short of electric motors on our gun turrets. He says, can you get them? I said, yeah. So I had a toolbox, so back to the plane, and I cut the wires and took these engines motors he wanted off, electric motors. So we went back to Casper in his plane, and everybody was interviewed individually, gave their own version of the crash. You know, then they said, well, if you make 5 training missions, more training, we already made 15 or 20, I don't know, 3 months. He said, if you make 5 more, you can have a 2-week furlough. And I had been home in, I don't know, 14 months or something. So I made the 5 more training missions, and really I said, well, when's the furlough? They said, well, we canceled it out. So I went to the commanding officer, was a captain. I said, you know, you promised us a furlough, you know. If I don't get the furlough, I'm not going to fly anymore. He says, you're a coward and all that stuff. So I was a corporal and he busted me to a private. So, but anyway, then I went to work in one of the hangars there for 30 days, and then I shipped out to just outside of Hollywood, California. I can't think of the name of the seaport there. Anyway, we shipped overseas from the West Coast, went south of Hawaii, went through the across the equator thing, which the ship's crew did for us, you know. They didn't put us guys through it, but we all got I forget.
So you're a shellback.
Yeah, that's right. We got a diploma anyway. We went up to Bombay, India. It was, I think, 30 or 31 days. And got off at Bombay, and from there, we went all the way across Calcutta on an aerial gauge train.
Mm-hmm.
I think the tracks were, I don't think they were wider than, it seemed like 3 feet. Small cars, mm-hmm. And there was a place for a man to sit. That was your spot. And you, at nighttime, we all slept on the floor and in the aisles and all that. And the cinders from the engine would blow. It was hotter than hell, blow in and all that. I think we were 5 days and 6 nights on that train, going to a camp called Par, 30 miles west of Calcutta. Mm-hmm. And I was there for a couple of weeks, and then I got shipped up to an airfield 200 miles north of Calcutta called Chabor, Chabau or UA or something like that. Mm-hmm. And from there we flew to Hump into China as we were getting on the plane. It was C-46 or 7 like you mentioned, mm-hmm. before, 47. You know, the guys are going, you're going to be sorry, they shut down two planes yesterday and all that stuff. So, anyway, we flew over without event, landed in Kunming, China, western China, southwestern China.
What was that like?
It was a very dusty, dry place. And we got there late in the afternoon, they fed us, and then we went in we had tents, and we went in the tents, and everybody had 2 duffel bags. About this high, about this big. With your clothes, gas mask, everything. One of the big things those days was, in the air raid drill, you grab your gas mask. She said, no sooner it got dark, and the sirens started up for an air raid. And the Japs had been bombing there anyway, and, you know, and we didn't panic, but we were very nervous. I picked up my duffel bag and just shook them out and to get my gas mask, and ran out and tripped over a tent rope and found these slit trenches and foxholes, like, you know, and jump in there till it was over. But the chaps never did much. They dropped the bombs. We were there were mountain ranges on the side, and the Chinese, some of them used to light fires up there, so when the Japs came in, they could see, they knew about where the runways were. And all our planes were in what they call revetments. They were higher than this room. There were U-shaped places all on around the runway, bordering the runway, and in each one of those was a bomber, see? But they had these high earthen walls, so if a bomb hit, it only could hit one plane. So I worked there, and I was with a ground crew, worked for a guy named Bill Kennett from Missouri, and I think there were 4 of us on the crew. We ate there. There was no GI food there. It was all rice and water buffalo chicken. It was hard. You couldn't hardly. It was bad. And the food was very poor. I weighed 128 pounds. You can believe it. Anyway, we serviced the planes, and we just had one. Each crew had one plane, and I changed engines and carburetors and all that stuff. And one of the things that I know, one day I had to change a carburetor, and they might have been made in Rochester. There were Stromberg carburetors. They were about 12, 14 inches long, and 6 or 8 inches wide, and about 6 or 7 inches high, and they were 4-barrel. These were 1,430 cubic inch radial engines. So I changed the carburetor, and the pilot had come down, and he said, is the work all done? And I said, yeah. He says, change the carburetor? I said, yeah. He says, let's go for a ride. So if you did any work, you knew that the pilot was going to, make sure that you did it right.
Now these were Liberators?
Yes, 4-engine Liberator bombers.
Okay.
And
obviously you did a good job.
Well, you made sure you did, And along the runway, they had in one of these earthen revetments, they had a hole in there. I don't know if it was reinforced. They call it the cave, where at nighttime you could go there and get a 12-egg omelet and a glass of cocoa for $1. A lot of chickens in China, I guess. A lot of eggs there. And all the bread was made from rice. Very heavy bread. And I was there. From there we went up to another airfield 20 miles from Kunming, and we flew out of there. I remember one day, I was not on a flight crew, but if you wanted to go anyplace in China, you had to fly. The roads were all mud, and I remember one time I had to go down with another guy to a place called Paoshan. It was right on the Burma Road in the middle of the Hump, and it was a very small field. And when they took us down, it wasn't a Liberator. The pilot tipped it up, and he went right around just like this. And I was sitting on the waist, on the floor. I could look out the waist window, and I could see the features on a Chinese guy in a rice paddy. That's how low we were. But anyway, this guy and I went in there, and they had what they call an A-frame. It's like a tripod, about steel about this big around, and the legs had wheels, and they were fastened together with a 1/2-inch cable. And they had a chain hoist, pushed it over the engine, and picked it up a little bit, and then loosened the bolts and took it off, fitted all the gas lines off, and put a new engine in it. They blew an engine on a mission. And so then we changed the engine, and then we flew back with that crew to our home base. And one day they were we had 14 bombers in my squadron, and I think there were 4 squadrons in our group. And they went down, taxied down the end of the runway to take off. The first engine down, the first plane down, blew up on the end of the runway. 10 guys, boom, all. So they all turned around, went down to the other end, took off. First one down, that end blew up. Called the mission off. But I have over in that my picture frame, I've got a write-up I give to you that tells my outfit, the 308th Bomb Group, received a Presidential Unit Citation twice. I mean, once was pretty good, but twice was almost unheard of. This write-up tells it all about. We sank nearly 1 million tons of Japanese shipping and troop ships, and this write-up tells the whole thing over there. I've got it in a slot in the back of that picture, and then they dropped the atomic bomb, and so the war in the Pacific was over. So they shipped us down to India, and after I was down there I was in Kunming, and I got sick. I couldn't eat for 7 days, and I finally went on sick call, and the guy says, "You got yellow jaundice, hepatitis. Oh, got to go to the hospital." I said, "How long?" He said, 2 or 3 days. Oh, okay. I had a couple of foot lockers, all full of silk and ivory and jade, carved elephants, that stuff to bring home. So I went to the hospital, and a couple of days later, they flew me down to Calcutta to the big hospital down there. And I said, "Where's my stuff?" He said, "It's on the way down." Never saw it. All I had was my underwear and my summer flying suit. They were like coveralls, you zip them up or zip them down, and the pockets and all that. And my cap and my shoes and socks and my wallet. So I was down there in Calcutta, base hospital or something, and it was so crowded that I had to sleep out on a porch. But they were all single beds made of wood railings, and they had a rope that went across. No mattresses, they had rope. And then they had a mattress about this thick, was on the top. But they had mosquito nets all around them. So at night you were completely, you brought the net and tucked it in all the way around. Well, while I was there, I got bronchitis, and I was coughing up blood. And I was there maybe a month, and then put on a hospital ship. And I went across the Pacific going over, but on the way coming home, we went through the Suez Canal, the Red Sea, and Mediterranean, and back to New York. And what just happened, that was in the winter of '45, in December, during the week before Christmas, month before December. It was a terrible storm. I went up on the deck, and I sat with my back up against one of the smokestacks, and the front of the ship would go down, and you could see about 60 feet of water, and it would come up like this, and they housed all the officers in the front of the ship, and when it hit those waves, it would go, you could hear all the bolts squeaking, it would go, ee, boom, ee, boom.
Now you're sitting on deck.
Yeah, I was sitting up on the top deck watching it, see, and we went south for a day to go around the storm, and then we landed in New York. I went to Halloran General, which I think was on Long Island, and it was the first time in a long time I remember we got there, they took us ashore, and you would see, movies of the ships coming home and the huge crowds, and when we got there, they just had a radio or something, Victrola plane. God bless America, or something, I don't know. A couple of people there, But on that boat, there was a son of a very important government official. He was housed in with us, but when we got to when we docked, we didn't. Yeah, before we docked, we were out in the harbor. A boat came out, and they got this guy and took him in to meet his father. Father was there. I don't know who it was or didn't know his name, but anyway, we went to this hospital and we had a nice roast beef dinner the first night, milk for the first time in a long time, ice cream, whatever you want. And we were always very well treated. From there, I went to the Rhodes General in Utica, New York. And from there, I went to Air Force Hospital in Coral Gables, Florida, and it was two big hotels. They had 2 swimming pools, 2 18-hole golf courses. They took us out deep sea fishing, but by then I had gone home, was madly in love. I could have stayed there for months, but after a couple of weeks, I said, look, I want to get out. So they shipped me to Fort Dix, and I guess a couple of days I was...
They discharged you out of Fort Dix?
Yes.
And then you came home?
And then I came home. On the way to New York City, I forgot to pick up $45 of some kind of mustering out money. So I got back on the train and went back to Fort Dix and got the dope. And then went to New York City and came into Grand Central Station and got on a train. And in those days, there were maybe 8 trains a day going to Buffalo from New York, you know. And the guy'd say, the Wolverine is now leaving platform 7 for Albany, Schenectady, Utica, Rome, Rochester, and Buffalo. All aboard! And took about 7 hours. I got home about 10:30, 11 at night in Rochester, and no buses then. So I got to the corner of East Avenue and Alexander, and I was bumming a ride. A guy picked me up and brought me all the way home. Well, in those days, our doors were never locked. So I got to my front door and it was locked. So I thought, geez, maybe my grandparents were sick and my mother was over there. So I had an aunt in town. I walked down there, and I stayed all night with her. And the next morning, she stopped at my mother's and said, you know, that I was in her house. So she came down, and it was a very happy time, you know.
That's great.
So
how would you summarize your military experience?
well, I'll tell you, I was always sorry that I never continued flying, because I really would have liked to finish it out and gotten, even though I was in combat, you know. I don't know, I have no idea where I would have been. Shortly after that, the planes were going to Palesti and, you know, the Romanian oil fields and losing 30%. The Killer Canes, there was a guy by the name of General Kane that led missions to the Palesti oil fields in Romania. And, you know, I just feel bad I didn't finish it out. But I had some interesting times in China, and it was a whole new
Let's get a picture of Wayne.
Okay, let me zoom right in on it.
This is a picture of me with my commanding colonel. That's when this is a presidential unit citation. I don't know if you're familiar with that. See, it has an oak leaf cluster in the center, which means we received it 2 times. And here's my gunner's wings. There's a Flying Tiger patch. This is one of my dog tags. This is a Asiatic Pacific Theater with 3 campaigns. This is a ribbon given, decoration given to all Americans that served in China.
Okay.
Good conduct, Victory Medal. It's American Theater.
I'm getting the glare off the light, if you can
You
just...
just hold it this, how we down?
Yeah, that's good like that.
Okay.
That's fine.
And down here, these are the New York State medals right here. The
Oh, yeah.
Distinguished Service Cross
Right.
and Shield. One of them's a CBI theater. And this is a write-up on my outfit.
Very nice,
Got it.
very nice.
Got it.
Okay, I'll take that down.
This was my commanding general. Clark Chenal was a major general, started out as a captain, and was, you still filming?
I got it.
Started out as a captain, but because of a hearing loss, left the Air Force in about 1937 or 8, and then